Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Mike, and today just want to talk to you about some stuff I've been researching, stuff I've been looking up. You know, this bear market, it's interesting because, you know, there's, despite the price going down, there's a ton of activity and a ton of positive developments happening. And if you're paying attention to that versus the price, you can't help but get excited. And so I just want to talk to you about those development happening and kind of talk to you a little bit also about my reflections about the bear market. 20 2017 was a wild ride. And for me, what I thought was happening in 2017 was that people were coming into Bitcoin because of the fundamentals. And turns out that most of that money, I think, coming into Bitcoin at that time was due to the ICO craze. And I know in hindsight, it's pretty easy to see. But during that time, for me, it was something that I had been waiting for since 2012. Once I understood what Bitcoin's value propositions were, how it was a very scarce digital kind of gold. I always knew it was going to be big, and I still think it's going to be the biggest thing we've ever seen. So as you saw the price rise from 1,000 to 20,000, I thought, oh, this is it. People are starting to realize the value that Bitcoin offers to the world, and they're understanding the scarcity that comes along with a Bitcoin system. And so I thought people were coming into Bitcoin because of those value propositions. Turns out it's all about getting rich quick. Most of it. You know, but the interesting thing about this bear market is that 2017 made a lot of noise, and it made so much noise that it's hard for these financial institutions now to ignore. I mean, I think Bitcoin's market cap got up to 360 billion, maybe. Maybe I mean I could be totally wrong, but I know, like, I believe overall crypto market cap got over $1 trillion, which is a big number, and I would assume that a lot of people noticed. And actually, I don't even have to assume; I know they did. And so the difference between this bear market and the last bear market, though, was the last bear market was a very clear. There was a very clear reason as to why, and it was very clear that the market wasn't mature enough. Sorry, I had to work through that. Um, but this bear market, the market is very much mature, right? Whereas in 2014, you had Mt. Gox collapsing, you had manipulation, you had, I mean, these exchanges that were getting hacked every 3 days, basically. I mean, it was crazy. Like every day there was a new hack. Um, Plus you had China banning Bitcoin. I mean, 2014 bear market versus 2017 bear market is totally different, right? Now the bear market, what's happening in the background is just a lot of positive developments happening, a lot of infrastructure being built out, and I can't help but get excited. So I just wanted to kind of share with you today my thoughts on all of that. So basically, technology, right? Especially new technology that comes out of the original, or it comes out of like the scope of whatever reality we're living in, right? It's something new to the paradigm that we're living in. These technologies follow an S-shaped adoption curve. That is, that they get adopted, and the number of users that come into the system, when you plot them out, they kind of form a S. And if you look here, let me see if I can find an S-shaped adoption curve here. So yeah, it kind of looks like that right there, right? And so what you have here is the early phase of adoption. These are the early adopters. And honestly, you know, I don't think we're out of this phase yet. We're very early still. And what happens is that since this technology comes in from the outside, it takes a while, especially Bitcoin. Bitcoin has a lot of intersectionalities, right? It requires understanding of disciplines that range from computer science, economics, monetary theory, monetary history, cryptography, mathematics, what else? Accounting, finance. Like these are all like disciplines and very like highly complicated disciplines. And you need to learn or you need to understand a little bit of all of those to get Bitcoin. And so it takes time. And for a lot of people, right, Bitcoin wasn't worth looking at, especially like high impact people. I'm talking about people who deal with a lot of capital, who deal with a lot of money. These are the people in Wall Street and institutions, family offices, endowments, all these people. It wasn't worth looking at because, there was still a lot of unknowns. There was still a lot of skepticism. There was still a lot of confusion. And so, what 2017 did, though, was force those people to now have to take a look at Bitcoin. It made so much noise that they can't ignore it. And that's what's happening right now in this bear market. These people are now being forced to look into Bitcoin and learn about Bitcoin. So back to this S-shaped adoption curve, right? So at the beginning, adoption happens slowly because there's a lot of learning that needs to take place. There's a lot of resistance also from the old paradigm. And if you can imagine, like Bitcoin is so outside the purview of anything that we've seen before. And it also threatens and challenges a lot of the incumbent systems. So, you can imagine there's going to be a lot of pushback, right? In China, they've tried to ban Bitcoin. In the United States, we've had, uh, you know, really high level banking officials and political officials talk about banning Bitcoin. Um, there's a lot of resistance to this type of technology, especially one that's more liberating. A liberating technology that frees a lot of people and removes the kind of rent seeking that happens in in the traditional systems. So if you can imagine the horse and buggy maker, right? He's not going to like the idea of the automobile. He's going to be very resistant to that. And in fact, there was a lot of resistance to the automobile. You can look up the Red Flag Act, where they made laws basically saying that anytime an automobile was passing through town, they had to have someone in front of the automobile waving a red flag, right? So again, early on, there's a lot of resistance and there's a lot of understanding that needs to take place. But at some point, there comes a time where it just reaches a critical mass, and the acceleration of adoption, I mean, just starts to skyrocket. And I think we're getting there. I think we're getting there. And this bear market, if you can understand this, if you can come to like understand this bear market is like a blessing in disguise, in my opinion, right? I'm not telling you there's not any financial advice. I'm just telling you my analysis of the situation. And so this bear market could be a blessing in disguise because if you kind of understand how these things evolve, right? It's and you realize like the infrastructure, right, is being built out. And we'll talk about that here in a second. There comes a point, I think it's 10 to 20%, where it just reaches an inflection point, and yeah, again, the adoption skyrockets. And with Bitcoin being a limited monetary instrument, right? The units are limited to 21 million. There is extreme scarcity there. And so I think what we're going to see is that once we start to, like, Bitcoin's rise has already been enormous, but I don't think we've seen anything yet. I think the amount of capital that's going to come in the next 1 to 3 years, maybe 5 years, I think that you need to ignore time in this situation. You just kind of have to look at the inevitability of it all. It's inevitable. Bitcoin is so powerful, so useful to the world, so liberating. It's like the internet, right? Like it was just inevitable. Once that, once people started communicating through wires, through and receiving them on computers, it was just game changing, and we see the result of it today. And so Bitcoin is going to power that type of innovation, that type of connectivity, uh, that type of economy, and throughout the world. It's going to be amazing. I don't know how it's all going to turn out, and I don't know if it's going to be positive, but I know it's inevitable because right now it is useful for a lot of people, um, especially high net worth individuals, institutions, people with a lot of wealth are going to find Bitcoin very, very valuable. And so as they come to learn about it, they're going to try to acquire Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is a scarce asset. And so if you look at the components of price, it's supply and demand. As people come to learn about Bitcoin, as people come to adopt Bitcoin, the demand is going to increase and the supply is limited. And so that's going to have upward pressure on price. So that's what I think is going to start the acceleration. So let's look at some of these things that I highlighted real quick on this. It's the S shape is caused by the fact that the innovation, whether it's a technology or pathogen, has first come in from outside the social system, and that means relatively few people are susceptible to begin with. And that's what I'm talking about here, is that Bitcoin was something that came from outside the system. There was a lot of understanding and learning that had to take place, also a lot of resistance that Bitcoin had to overcome. But I think we're at a point now. So here, let's read this. The S-shaped curve have a critical takeoff point at between 10 and 20% of the system, where a sufficiently large number of people in the community have adopted to make the rate of growth turn upward and continue climbing until the system begins to run out of unaffected members. So in this place, they talk about the S-shaped adoption curve being similar to that of a pathogen spreading throughout, its hosts, I guess. And so that's why they say unaffected members. But it's funny. A lot of people relate to Bitcoin as a virus. There's Pompliano, right? The guy, I forgot his first name. Pomp, they call him on Twitter, right? And he always has this saying that the virus is spreading, and he's out there actually doing part of that, spreading. He's out there talking to these funds, he's out there talking to these institutions, and he's communicating the value propositions that Bitcoin offers, and they're learning about it now. And so again, he's part of that process of awareness and understanding that occurs during the early phase. That's why I say we're still in it. If you think you've missed the boat on Bitcoin, I don't think you've seen nothing yet. So let's continue. The S-shaped adoption curve applies to virtually all innovations, but something interesting happens when the innovation in question is a communication technology like mobile phones or the internet. Bitcoin is a communication technology. Basically, what they're saying here is a cycle of positive feedback sets in, which makes the adoption curve accelerate faster, or still faster. So when it's something like Bitcoin, what happens is that every member that joins the network adds value to it, and so that creates a positive feedback loop, and accelerates the rate of adoption. That's why I think Bitcoin is going to, that inflection point, that price rise is going to happen, I mean, really, really quick. I think it's going to be disorienting for many people. They're not going to understand or make sense of it. And this is why I'm making this video, kind of, so you can understand what's about to happen. Um, so a cycle of positive feedback sets in, which makes the adoption curve still accelerate faster. This is partly why the World Wide Web has grown from 0 to a billion users in the last 15 years. Okay. Uh, the first members of a community to take up the innovation must necessarily learn about it from outside the social system, and so are more dependent on indirect knowledge transmission via newspapers, books, or other media. However, as the innovation spreads through the community, more and more people are able to learn of it directly from neighbors, workmates, friends, or family members. This is what I was talking about. Pompliano out there spreading that message, having podcasts. Podcasts are like, I mean, it's booming. YouTube is still booming, even in the spare market, right? And look, I'm out here spreading the message, like, and and people are taking the sum of learnings that have occurred over the past 10 years, well, since Bitcoin's inception. And now they're putting that in a very easily digestible format for people to rapidly understand what this is, what this technology is, and the impact that it could have on the world. So you don't have to read, books throughout all the disciplines that Bitcoin uh, intersects with. You can listen to a podcast and get a really good understanding of what Bitcoin is and the impact it's going to have. So again, real quick, I just want to say, I think we're just at the inflection point of this S-shaped adoption curve. I think that some participants of adoption are more important than others, especially when it comes to monetary instruments. So I think institutions coming to this space is going to be huge. But here's the thing: Bitcoin is open source and anyone can own it. And as it gets adopted, that growth gets translated into its price. Okay. And so, this type of asymmetric bet, basically, where you don't have to risk a lot to make astronomical returns, right? This usually only happens to accredited investors, venture capitalists, people like that, right? Where there's specific laws and rules in, you know, in our legislative, in our, basically there's a bunch of laws and rules that restrict the average Joe from participating in these asymmetric bets. But with Bitcoin, you can. And that's why also, if you can come to understand this, you can take a small bet that may be risky, may not be, but that can provide you astronomical returns, like, potentially huge returns. And I'll talk about that eventually. But like, people talk about $1 million Bitcoin, $10 million Bitcoin. I don't think it's far fetched. And so today Bitcoin is $3,500. Imagine it being worth $1 million one day. That's a huge, huge profit right there, life changing. And so, this is what I'm trying to say. I think it's worthwhile, especially for average people who are just hardworking Americans who have a little bit of savings. They're not, millionaires. They're not institutional investors. But hey, man, this is the biggest asymmetric bet in your life. And I think sometimes some bets, the odds are so good that it's more risky not to take them. So just keep that in mind. All right, and I want to talk about basically one of the value propositions just popped up. So Maduro stymied in bid to pull 1.2 billion of gold from UK. So whether you think this guy's a good guy or a bad guy, doesn't matter. Basically, he has gold in the UK, in the Bank of England, that he can't get out. $1.2 billion worth. So what I think is that governments of the world, at first it's going to be the despotic governments, but eventually I think all governments will start to they'll start to adopt Bitcoin in order to diversify. Because with Bitcoin, you don't have to trust a third party. You don't have to trust the Bank of England. Maduro could hold those Bitcoins in his head. All right, like he could have a paper wallet or a brain wallet. So this is what I'm saying. I think it's only a matter of time before governments start to adopt it. This is what I this is what I mean by they're different. Um, Adopters have more weight on the S-shaped adoption curve. If there was a government that came out and said that they have 5% of their reserves in Bitcoin, I mean, I think the price would spike uh, immediately. Like it wouldn't even be a question. And so, um, it's only a matter of time before these dominoes start to fall, and it's only going to make that rate, that S-shaped adoption curve, that slope. It's only going to make it more steep. So we're starting to see um, clear reasons why Bitcoin exists. Whether you think it's good or bad, this is not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that there's a use case out there for governments, central banks, high net worth individuals, and just average people as well who are saving their money, right? Um, and then let's see what else. Here, I was kind of doing some research today and kind of drew what the institutional landscape is going to look like, right? And I know this is just very basics type of stuff, but I kind of wanted to see what was happening. And as you can see, there's a lot of things under construction and coming soon. And this, I mean, I can't even tell you how much money is behind all of this. I mean, we're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars. So imagine those trillions of dollars or a certain percentage. Let's just say it's 5% moving into Bitcoin, a scarce, limited asset. The effect that it's going to have on price is going to be huge. And these are all institutional rails being built. And like where institutional players couldn't come into the fold before because they didn't have the expertise or knowledge or even the ability, regulatory ability to do it. Now they do. And again, this is going to just add fuel to that fire. Um, so, and I read this article. I think it's a really good article. I'll link to it in the description, but you should check it out. Uh, Really good stuff. Talking about the institutional investors that are coming, and I don't think it's just a matter of time. It's inevitable. Bitcoin is just too powerful of a technology. So you know, do with this information what you want, but if you have a low type preference, if you can wait, right? If you don't need the money now, if you can save a little bit, put a little to the side, I think that Bitcoin is worth your while to explore and look at if it's right for you. So, all right, guys. Anyways, I'm going to take off. I've talked enough. I hope everyone's doing well in this bear market. I've never been more excited about this stuff, man. I've never been more excited about this stuff. So get ready. I think the next bull run is going to be the biggest we've ever seen. So I don't know when it happens, though. It could even be, it could be 5 years out. I don't know when, but it's coming. There's no doubt. If you've used Bitcoin, you know the magic that happens. Also, Ethereum. I mean, the stuff that's being developed on there, it's just kind of mind bending. I took out a loan for 0.5%. I used my crypto as collateral. I mean, and it took literally 5 minutes to do. And I didn't have to talk to anyone. It was just a few clicks of the button, right? And I had money in my bank account. I had a loan in my bank account at 0.5%, where I don't know where you can get that interest rate anywhere else. So these things that are being built are huge. So, all right, guys. Again, I'm rambling on. Take it easy. Let me know what you think. Peace out.